Hey everybody, and welcome back to Standby for Adventure. This is John. Feel free, and actually I encourage you to please like, subscribe, and share. I'm trying to build up a little bit of a following here, and I think I have some interesting things to say with like 40 years of game mastering experience. So if you like what you see here, please do share it. I would appreciate it a lot. And yeah, there you go. Today we're going to talk about something actually um, that I think is very important, and that's why I want to talk about it. It's about knowing who your players are and what they like out of the game. This is, if you're a new GM, this is information that you will sort of naturally learn over time, but if you actually think about it while you are playing the game or even while you are planning your games, you and your players will have a lot more fun at the table because the experiences and the situations that you come up with, the stories, the plots, the characters, NPCs, everything that you come up with will be designed often, if not always, to appeal to what your characters or what your players and their characters want out of the game. This is completely ripped off from Aaron ALSTON, who I'll talk about a little bit at the end. And this first appeared, these categories first appeared back in the early 90s in a book called Strike Force that got a recent update via Kickstarter a couple of years ago. And this information is still very, very valuable. And I know that that book, Strike Force, was a favorite of many, many gamers, and not just people who played Champions, which is what that supplement was for. Because it had information like this, and Aaron spent the time to put down on paper the things that he had realized about writing games and running games for people. And he was a prolific writer. He created some fantastic stuff. I absolutely love the stuff. He passed away, unfortunately, a number of years ago. And but we still are talking about him because he was pretty remarkable and did some great stuff. He also has some really fun novels that he wrote. Um, so this is all about knowing your players, and this is the sort of I've mentioned this before. What I like to do when talking about gaming is try to inspire ideas and give you new ways to come up with ideas if you're one of those people who gets stuck every now and again or isn't sure, like, can I do this, should I do that, is this good, is it bad, whatever. How can I come up with ideas that will be fun and entertaining and keep my players engaged at the table and let us all have as much fun as possible? So we're going to talk about that. Know your players. And then the important part, the next part, is, if I can do it, give them what they want. I'm not saying give them everything and just be like, yeah, you win, you get the world. No, I'm saying as we go through this list of character types or player types, you can give that player a way to interact with the game that they will enjoy more than anything else. And knowing, being able to identify what your players are and then being able to provide that in game is so much fun and really enriching to the game experience in general. So let's just jump in here. I'm not going to go super in depth on any of these, but I think what the important thing is to think about what it is your players like out of a game and how you can give that to them in the game. And let's just jump in here. So the first one that I'm going to talk about here is the Pro from Dover. And the Pro from Dover actually, in the book that ALSTON wrote, he regarded himself as a Pro from Dover. So this little image that I have here is obviously an old reference to the MASH movie, but ignore that. It's more the Pro from Dover. And basically, the Pro from Dover player wants to be the best they are at what they do. So if you are, for instance, a GM is a perfect example of a Pro from Dover. They want to be a really good GM. They want to be the best. But you might have a player who wants to be the best sniper in the world, or they want to be the fastest man alive, or they want to be. So they want to constantly be the best at whatever it is, and they want to be able to show that they are the best in the game. And it's not really a matter of showing off, it's a matter of proving that they are, in fact, the best, and they will always be the best. And when somebody comes to you with that, you can give that to them over and over again. You're the best at this, you're the best at this, we came to the best, and they'll like that. But then, if you switch the tables a little bit, or flip the tables a little bit, and have somebody challenge them, they'll get even more involved because and engaged, because their position is being threatened, and that will draw them in that much more. I'm not saying you should then destroy them and make them not be the best that has ever been. I'm saying that that is something that will motivate them at the table to engage and play and do whatever they can to maintain their position, because that's ultimately what it is they're looking for from a game. They want to be the best. Second type of player is the builder, and as you can see here, I have a picture of oh god, I can't even remember his name. Tony Stark's father. That his name complete. It's probably like Anthony or something. I have no idea. I don't know why I can't think of it. But anyway, whoever played Iron Man, right? If Iron Man were a player character, was a builder. Tony Stark, all the Starks really were very much about changing the world around them. I toyed with including a picture of like Reed Richards here, and Reed Richards is a builder, but really he's more of the pro from Dover, or he may even be oh, what else might he be? He could be one of the other, maybe a genre fiend for exploration. He's like the ultimate explorer and scientist. But for the builder, they want to be able to have an impact on the world. They want to change something about the world or make it better. If you looked at somebody like even Dr. Manhattan is sort of a builder, although his building is kind of a side effect of his mere existence, because he can change so much stuff. And there was that bit in The Watchmen about Night Owl and he having a conversation about the new electronic vehicles coming out, which were going to be the death knell for the Night Owl's business and all that sort of stuff. That's the sort of thing the builder wants to do. They want to have an effect on the world and change it in some way. And if you can give that to that player in game, by letting them invent something or letting them change a political structure or something, like whatever it is that that player is interested in, that's going to get them interested and engaged and doing stuff. And they will come back week after week in order to continue building or see what's happened and how things have changed. Next is the buddy. This is probably where most of us started. This is the person who comes to the table week after week, either because they're kind of curious about gaming but haven't really done it before, and initially they're not really engaged, or they keep coming back because they like it and they're trying to find their place. And this type of gamer is great because it's basically new players, and every new player who shows up at the table has something that will get them excited. Even if it's just the socializing with their friends and hanging out, maybe that's all the buddy does, but they're there and they can be reliable, and maybe you will eventually get to the point, and they will get to the point, that they'll figure out, you know what, I come here every week and we've never had an adventure like X, and we suddenly have, and now I find myself super interested in that. And maybe it's they find out that they actually want to be a builder, like in the last slide, and then you have a new hook for them. The buddy, what you want to do is just make sure everybody's having a good time, and you don't ignore the buddy, even though they might be there every week regardless, because they can be a real anchor for the rest of the game, and because they can turn into another type of gamer that would be there every week and not just be a seat filler, quote unquote. That's I don't mean that in a bad way, but they actually have something else that they're excited about, and they come to the table not just for the socialization, but they come for the socialization and the fact that there's something else going on that they really, really enjoy about the game. Buddies are great. I have gamed with buddies my entire life, and they show up and they have a good time. And you have to learn how to kind of bring a different sort of player out of them instead of just being there for the socializing. The ever popular combat monster, and there is a reason why I have put Wolverine here, because he is kind of classically the big combat monster. Don't worry, I'll have the other one here in just a minute. And the combat monster wants to have combat. That's what they're there for. They want to fight, 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 fight. And that's it. That's what they want. They do want to be competent. They want to be powerful. They want to be effective. They want to outlast everybody. They want to be able to deal the most damage. They want to be in combat. They may cause a little bit of chaos if they constantly have to be in combat, but you can also talk to a combat monster and say, listen, I know you like to have combat, and you don't have to label them a combat monster, but in your head you can. But talk to them and say, I know you like to have combat, but the other players like to do other things, so just know that there will be combat. There will be things that you can engage with at the table, and if you don't want to do a whole heck of a lot of role-playing outside of combat, that's fine. Just be open to it. And most combat monsters are fine with that. Maybe they'll get a little restless if you go too long without a combat break or something like that. But, if you watch Critical Role, Travis probably started as a combat monster. He wanted to be fighting. He didn't care about the romance and not so much about the role playing, a little bit, but not as much as everybody else. And and certainly in the first campaign with Grog, right? Like, Grog was the quintessential combat monster. And eventually, in campaign 2, Travis came around and started doing some romance stuff, which was a little surprising to everybody at the table, and it was very, very cool. So people can change over time too, and I'm not saying Travis is going to be a romantic player. I think he is still very much a combat monster, but he has gotten a lot more into the role-playing side of things, and I think that's fantastic. And that's the sort of thing that can happen at your table. So make sure to give your combat monsters an opportunity to fight. If you have a table full of combat monsters, you're probably not going to be doing a whole heck of a lot of role-playing. You're probably going to be running basically a fancy board game. The Genre Fiend. I had to go with cosplay on this image just because some cosplay people do absolutely incredible work, and it is the perfect definition of the Genre Fiend. The Genre Fiend wants to play in a genre and get every last detail right. So if they are playing a Viking game, they want it to be a real Viking game. They want to get into it and know about the shields and the swords and what their culture was like, and the fact that they bathed and combed their hair and plaited their hair, and they'll know all of that stuff just because they are excited about the genre. It could be a genre fiend, could only be a genre fiend for superheroes, or only for high fantasy, or only for gritty low fantasy, or only for detective stories. And if you give a genre fiend that sort of hook to bite, they will take it and run. And it's a whole lot of fun to see that happen, because you will always have somebody at the table who will sort of act as a backstop for you as the GM if you're getting some details about the genre wrong, and you can kind of check with them and say, is that actually right? Because I want it to be something like this, but I don't want it to break the genre convention, which can be very important. Sorry, excuse me. Genre fiends are great. It's just really fun. They like to get into it and get all the little pieces of it right. There is the Copier. And I had to use Ryan Reynolds and Deadpool. Deadpool could have been the combat monster, but I thought it made so much more sense as the Copier, because Deadpool is a copy of 2 or 3 characters kind of mashed together, and Ryan Reynolds kind of plays the same character every time, and we love him for it because it's just fun. But the copier has a certain character, and it could be a character from a comic or a book or some story, or it could be just a character the player has made up, and they play that character one game after the other, after the other, after the other. Even might be named the same, might look the same, might look different, might be named differently, but it's basically the same character. I always play this wizard that does this. I always play a fighter that does this. I always play a paladin. I always play a character like a Wolverine like character. I always play that sort of thing. And you can see how some of these can duplicate, right? So you could have the copier along with the combat monster, which is exactly what Deadpool is. Um, and if you have a copier at your table, you have an endless supply of stories because they have told you this is the character I want. I want to just keep telling stories with this character that's the character that I love. I just want them to be involved. So it's really easy to run games for copiers, especially if you can uh, kind of mess with that whole idea. Maybe send clones after the copier, and or they find out they're actually, and just play with the expectations, because it can be a lot of fun for somebody to get presented with something that they hadn't really expected, and they have to react in a way that they haven't had to before. So I actually think almost everybody has a little bit of the copier, because everybody ends up playing themselves at the table, even if sometimes they really do try to role play. It's hard to get out of your own head. So that's the copier, and I think copiers make a lot of sense. I have characters that I absolutely love that I would love to play again, but I also have 700 million different ideas, and so I always have a new character to play. Then there's the Mad Thinker with some, wow, old original art here from Kirby. And the Mad Thinker is the puzzle solver. They want to outthink, outsmart, outwit anybody who's up against them. You as the GM, the bad guys that you play, he wants to outsmart the other players. That, like, he or she, they want to outsmart the other players. That's what the Mad Thinker lives for. They are excited to be presented with a puzzle, to find the solution that might be not quite as straightforward as what you were thinking was going to happen in the game. Mad Thinkers can be a lot of fun and really challenging to run games for, because they can quickly start going places that you did not expect, and you have to respond because they're thinking, and you are going to have to think in response to that. Make sure to throw lots of puzzles and tricks and traps and weird things at the Mad Thinker, and they will enjoy it. They will have a good time. If you get into making puzzles as on your own, that is going to really pay off in game, especially if you work that sort of thing into dungeons or encounters or things like that. That the Mad Thinker can sit back and go, wait a minute, like, we've got something simple like the chandelier. I'm going to cut the chandelier and have it fall and kill people, or fall on the bad guys, and then we can escape while they're trapped in that. And it's not just a straightforward combat, right? They're going to think kind of a little bit laterally, or at an angle that's unexpected. Mad Thinker's also a lot of fun at the table. The Plumber. And the Plumber, I chose this picture because it's Rogue and Miss Marvel, or now Captain Marvel, because I thought they kind of represented this idea the best. And the Plumber is basically about characters that want to play out, or players who want to play out a fully realized character and really explore that character's identity and existence and that sort of thing. And I think Captain Marvel and Rogue are a good example of that, because way in the past, when Captain Marvel was originally Miss Marvel, Rogue drained her powers completely, wiped out her memory, and now, decades later, Carol is back, has her memory, has Captain Marvel powers again, But there was all that time where they got to explore this space, again, if this were a player character, but the writers got to explore this space of a character losing their complete sense of identity and trying to find a new place to exist and building up a whole new personality and then regaining their old personality. And it's just a fantastic and super interesting arc for the character. That is something that I think these days a lot of players really get into. They want to feel like they are playing a complete person when they are sitting down at the game table to have a good time. The romantic. I'm going to get my cat because he's going crazy. The romantic, I probably shouldn't have to say much about this, but the romantic is very much about romance subplots and the interactions between characters, and they are very much about role-playing, and they may not necessarily be interested in pursuing a romantic relationship with anybody at the table, but in character, there could be things that come up that just make one of the players go, "Oh, that would be really interesting." I don't think the players in Critical Role go out of their way to have romantic entanglements with each other, but there's something within them as they are playing the characters that they recognize that their character sees something in one of the other characters, and they want to explore that. This can be kind of an iffy one at the table, at least classically. I think this sort of thing has gotten much more widely accepted now and is considered completely normal. And it should be because, guess what? People like to be romantic and like to have partners and be with each other and things like that. So why not have that at the game table? This is also just a really interesting way to interact with the game table as well, because it introduces a completely different sort of dynamic to role-playing that most tables in the past haven't really concentrated on. And now there's games that are very much almost exclusively about the romance of role-playing, and it's fun. It's interesting. There were in the original Strike Force book, they had a really excellent character who I can't remember, Lorelei, I think her name was, but she had kind of really inobvious mind control powers that were based off pheromones, and the player was fairly new to role playing, and the GM Aaron introduced a swashbuckler type superhero, and the player was like, "Oh, I think my character would totally fall in love with that person." But it took literally years for Aaron as the GM to pick up on this. And when he finally did, that player of the mind controller, the Lorelei Siren character, just absolutely loved it, was really super engaged with it. They started doing something called blue booking, which is another thing Aaron ALSTON created, which was literally like if you have those old college essay books that were the little blue books that you would write in. I don't even know if they do those anymore. But they would write, like that would be their whole role-playing session, is they would write stories to each other about what their characters were doing and hand them back and forth across the table. And it was very, very useful for the romantic player, because that allowed them to get what they wanted out of the game and didn't make anybody else feel uncomfortable role-playing something that they wouldn't normally want to do. Really, really a fantastic innovation, the blue booking or just journaling, whatever you want to call it, that sort of thing. But pay attention, if you have a romantic at the table, you may have to, or you may want to, introduce some romance subplots into your game, and set up situations like parties or even things going on in a bar or restaurant or something like that, where there can be interaction with other characters that could lead to a romance. Then there is, in ALSTON's original write-up, it was the Rules Rapist, but I'm going to call it the Power Gamer. And the Power Gamer is there specifically to know the rules backwards, forwards, and inside out, and take advantage of them as much as possible. Basically, sort of a power or sort of a combat monster, but it doesn't necessarily have to be about combat. It could be about being like the absolute most broken gadgeteer, or this would be the player at the table who says, well, it's allowed by the rules, and doesn't care that it unbalances everything else in your game. And these are probably the most problematic at the table if they are completely unreasonable. Uh, I have never run into completely unreasonable power gamers, but for some reason they really take offense when you tell them that they are power gaming and that it's not doing anybody any favors. Um, be careful with power gamers. Be upfront with them. Let them know, like, you know the rules better than me. I am not going to try to rein you in. I'm just going to use GM fiat to make sure that whatever it is you're doing doesn't upset everybody else at the table. And that's kind of a crappy way to handle it, but it's also really crappy for somebody to come to the table and ignore what everybody else at the table is doing and only care that they are doing what they want to do. Um, Sometimes you can hopefully turn the power gamer aside to one of the other character types, or player types, such as the pro from Dover, which I think is sort of a natural fit for them, as is the combat monster. But it's going to be hard to convince somebody who's really into the game system to not be into it, and that's just how it is. So you'll have to kind of deal with that as the GM. Then there's the Showoff. The Showoff, this could also be where somebody like Deadpool could be. The Showoff basically has to be the center stage all the time, and they can be incredibly disruptive. But if you give them opportunities to shine, then and you make it clear to them, like, you don't have to always be speaking. You don't have to always be the one in charge, making decisions, telling everybody else what to do. You don't have to always be the one who interacts with the NPCs. Let other people step forward, especially if the Showoff is at a table where they are the most gregarious and social person, and everybody else is a little bit more standoffish or not as comfortable being social, or likes to think before they speak, or doesn't just automatically have something to say. Uh, so the Showoff also, like I said, can be disruptive, but you should also be able to talk to the Showoff, and they should understand, like, okay, you're right, like, everybody else is here to play as well. I should say, I shouldn't take up all the time at the table of just me and you talking while everybody else is just there. Um, but absolutely make sure to give the Showoff a chance to shine and a chance to be the center of attention from time to time, because that's what they like, that's what they want to do. And you should reward that, because if everybody else is a little standoffish, you can rely on the Showoff to be able to step up and have an answer for you, or to have something to say, or to offer a suggestion, and to hopefully draw everybody else into the game based on their personality. Final or second, penultimately, I was going to say finally, penultimately, there is the Tragedian. And the Tragedian wants to play. They want to play the downtrodden. They want to play people who are miserable and conflicted, and they want to play Hamlet, right? They want to really get dirty and roll around in the angst of their character and have terrible things happen to them and always be at a disadvantage. And even if they win, like, the win is fantastic, but there's something bad that goes along with it. These are the players who back in the 80s would have played half-orcs, right? Because half-orcs were very much not a heroic race. And somebody like the Hulk would be a tragedy character, even though the Hulk himself would probably be like a combat monster. Maybe. Well, Bruce Banner is the tragedy part, and the Hulk sort of is too, because he's a simpleton most of the time, right? He's very childlike. He doesn't understand the world. He's always at a disadvantage intellectually and socially, but physically he is a powerhouse. But that can also get him into a ton of trouble. The Hulk is always on the run. He is very much a tragic figure in terms of what the player, or in this case the writers, have to work with. And if you make it so that that player who's playing a tragic character has those sorts of situations to respond to, their character might be miserable, but the player is going to love it. They're just going to smile the whole time that their character is weeping and feeling terrible. And it's just fun. Like, that's all it is. It's a way to get that stuff out of the system. And yeah, it's really cool. Finally, there is, this is not one that Aaron Alston had. This was another suggestion I found online. The indecisive player. This is sort of the flip side of the copier who has a favorite character. The indecisive player is the one who's like, I want to play an accountant. I want to play a police officer. I want to play a shape-shifting supervillain. And that's just what this image is. But it's a fine, although somewhat disruptive kind of player to be, because the GM also always has to be coming up with ideas for how to swap out one character and swap in another character. But ultimately what you want is for your players to be happy with what they're playing. And if, especially for a new player, if they're really just sort of finding their way and they want to rewrite their character, they want to introduce somebody new or whatever, let them. That's fine. They're still trying to figure out, like, what is it that I enjoy? What do I want to play? And maybe they should be playing somebody like a shapeshifter that allows them to change their appearance and change their role depending on what's going on in the game, and gives them a way to be indecisive in terms of who they are while still being at the table and playing the game and having a good time with everybody else. Anyway, those are, with the inclusion of the indecisive player, all of the examples of the different types of players that Aaron Alston wrote about in this Strikeforce book. There's also another excellent, this is Aaron, by the way, there is also an excellent book by Robin D. Laws, that I don't remember the name of right now, and I know it's long out of print, but I'm sure you can probably find it on the Steve Jackson website. And it goes over similar sorts of things. Basically, get to know your players and give them the sorts of things that they want. I am running through this list today specifically because I find it very useful to think about, well, like I said in last week's video, different ways to come up with ideas for games. And if I can look at a map and come up with an idea, then great. But maybe sometimes I need to look at what the players and their characters want, and that can give me ideas too. And I think that's an excellent way to make your gaming experience as the DM and your players, or GM, and your players' experiences that much more fun and enriching and enjoyable for everyone. Anyway, that is today's standby for adventure. So as I said, go through, think about who your players are, think about what their characters are, what roles they fit into. I'll include down below in the notes each one of these definitions. And so if you don't want to watch the video again to find out all the names, I also highly recommend checking out the Strikeforce book. I'm sure that's available somewhere online as a PDF, probably at DriveThruRPG is my guess. I haven't looked. I backed the Kickstarter, so I have it from that. And there you go. I will be back on Thursday for Thaco Thursday. And I think on Thursday we are going to take a spin through the Monsters of the Multiverse book that I have right down here to just sort of refresh our memories about what's in that book, because it's going to be on the shelves in the next week or so. Stand by for adventure, and I will see you next time.